Hi everyone, welcome back to Somerset House and the third instalment of our digital series, Upgrade Yourself, Peer Exchange. My name is Scott and I'm the creative producer leading on the Creative Careers and Skills programme at Somerset House. Today's event is being streamed live on Twitch TV, Somerset House website, YouTube Live, Facebook Live and Twitter. If you'd like to ask a question and for a chance it may get read out, please comment on one of the platforms using the hashtag Somerset House. Our Creative Careers programme supports emerging new talent and offers access routes into the creative industries, which we deliver as 3 strands. The first strand is the Creative Careers Academy, which offers full-time work placements fairly paid at London living wage within the creative sector. Second strand is the Creative Job Studio, mentoring and networking events in partnership with charity Creative Society. And the third strand is Upgrade Yourself, skills enhancing workshops and talks, both delivered digitally and eventually in IRL. Today, Somerset House Studios artist Nabihah Iqbal will be sharing some of her work experiences, ideas and advice, and you'll see me a little later to pose some of your questions back over to Nabihah. For now, sit back, get comfortable and immerse yourselves. I'm now delighted to hand you over. Nabihah, you're here?
Yeah, hi everybody.
Cheers.
This is the first kind of like live streaming thing I've done since lockdown started, so it's a new experience, but hopefully it'll be okay. Thanks to Somerset House for inviting me to take part in this peer exchange. I'm going to start by talking a little bit about myself and what I do and what I've done so far over the last few years. And then I think me and Scott will have a little bit of chat in more detail about some of my work, and then there'll be time for questions as well. So hopefully it should be quite a productive hour. But yeah, so my name is Nabihah Iqbal and I'm a musician, producer, DJ and radio broadcaster from London, based in London as well. And I've been doing music full time for about 6 years now, coming up to 7 years. And it's been a really exciting time so far with ups and downs, but you know, music's always been my favorite thing in my whole life, and it feels like a bit of a dream to be able to focus on it. I should start by saying that I never actually planned to do music as a career because I don't know, I guess it's a combination of having like Asian parents and just other things, like, you know, focus on education and therefore just feeling like I need to do a proper job. But for university, I went to SOAS, the School of Oriental and African Studies in the University of London, and I did an undergraduate degree, joint honours in history and ethnomusicology. And then after that, I went to Cambridge and did an MPhil specialising in African history, specifically South African history. And then after that, I did the law conversion course, and then I did the bar because I was planning to try and become a barrister. So I did all of that. And then it was basically the year after that, I was working with a group of women's rights lawyers out in Cape Town. And that was really, I don't know, like, yeah, profound experience, I guess, because doing women's rights in South Africa is just quite intense. But all the way through uni and even during that time, I was always doing music on the side. And then when I got back to London, which would have been in like summer 2013, that's when all the music side of things started gathering more momentum, and it was like a message from the universe or something. And I just thought, if I don't focus on it now, then when will I get the chance? So that's when I thought, I'm going to focus on music full time. Obviously my parents were like, what the hell are you doing? Because they thought they were, you know, their daughter was going to become a barrister. But yeah, and now here I am to talk about the last few years. So I've made a little PowerPoint presentation as well, just with some pics. So let me see if I can share my screen now. And then hopefully you can all see it. Yeah. Okay, here we go. So I've been trawling through Facebook and everything to try and find some early pictures of when I first started DJing, and I managed to find a couple. And I think the one on the left-hand side with the yellow wall in it, that might actually be from my first ever DJ set that I played. You know, I've done talks before and people always ask me, well, how did you get into music and how did you start? And like I said, you know, it just kind of happened by itself, but it's not that I wasn't doing anything until one day I was like, oh, all right, I'm going to start doing music now and suddenly be propelled into, you know, the public sphere. Rather, it was more of like a sort of organic and very grassroots process. So me and my group of friends at that time in London, we were always, you know, like just making music, sharing music with each other, putting on parties. And then this picture here is from a party in a laundrette. So a group of my friends at that time, they used to hire out laundrettes around London and then put on parties inside. I think they'd pay like a couple of £100 to whoever owned the laundrette, and they just thought, I think they just thought we were weird because they were wondering why we'd want to do something like this. And then we just put a sound system inside, fill it out with people, and it was, yeah, some of the most fun nights I've had, actually. And then that's where I first started DJing. I was practicing anyway, and then the guys were like, oh, why don't you actually play at the party? And it went down really well the first time I performed, and then that's how it started. They just kept asking me to play at each one, and you can see I was using a laptop. I actually was thinking about this today. I think this whole era, that picture's from 2010. That was the beginning of when people really started using laptops to DJ, and it kind of like, you know, made the whole thing a lot more accessible, I think. So I started DJing on a laptop, and in the other picture you can see the controller I'm using. I was using the Tractor program on the laptop from Native Instruments, and that controller like simulates a sort of like normal DJ mixer setup. And that other picture's from a party in Peckham in 2012 in Copeland Industrial Estate, when it was still just warehouses where people would have all night parties. And yeah, it was a lot of fun. So yeah, that's how I started, really. And then, you know, it was also in the days before Instagram. Now that makes me sound really old, but I mean, things are changing really quickly. And so it was just like people come to the parties, enjoy it, tell other people about it. And each time we'd get more and more people. And I used to run club nights with various friends, and quite a lot of them are all focusing on music now. And it's really nice to see how everyone's come out of that scene from, you know, between 2010 and 2012, and to see what they're doing now. Yeah, so then in 2013 is when things started getting busier for me, and that was also the year that I got offered my own radio show on NTS, which I've now been doing for 7 years. A bit crazy. And this was something totally new for me. I'd never done any radio before. I hadn't even really thought about it. And I went on one of my friends' shows as a guest, and I was sharing some music that I found whilst I was studying ethnomusicology at SOAS, because for me that was a really formative time in terms of discovering new music from all around the world and different sounds that I'd never heard before. And it just was really fascinating, and I wanted to share some of those sounds, whether it was like, you know, Mongolian throat singing or sitar music or gamelan from Indonesia. So I picked out a few of those tracks, played them on the radio, and it just so happened that the station manager was tuned in at the time, and he really liked what I was doing. And I don't think there was anyone else doing anything similar on NTS back then. So they just asked me if I'd wanted to present my own show, and obviously I said yes. And it's been a really fun experience so far. Just present a show every other week. It's a lot of music by now, and 7 years to try not to play the same song twice on the radio. But it's just been so it's been a really beautiful thing to do, actually, because you start to learn about how people are listening to your music from all over the world and places that you'd never imagine. And just been receiving loads of really heartfelt messages about people tuning into the shows and discovering new music and how it made them feel. And I just feel like it's a really amazing medium through which to share music and also to connect with people. So that's been going well. And I think, you know, through that, just getting a bit more exposure and people finding out who I am. And then the same year, I released my first record as well. So this whole time that I was making music, I mean, DJing and starting to do radio, I was also making music on the side. And like, it's not something that I've learned, you know, in terms of music production on the computer. It's not something that I've learned formally, but just again with friends who also made music, just helping each other, sharing things, teaching each other. That's how I learned. So I basically learned how to use Ableton. But if I'm honest, before that I was just messing around on GarageBand as well and trying to make tracks, coming up with different things and then just posting them on my SoundCloud. Never really thought about who'd be listening. But then, yeah, so that year in 2013, I got a message, like quite a mysterious email from someone saying that they really liked my music on SoundCloud and they wanted to release it. And then after a few emails, I realized that the person messaging me was Kasim Moss, who's one of my favorite techno producers, and he runs a small label called Omanira, and he wanted to put out one of my tracks called Mystic Places on that. So that came out in October 2013, and I've got like the actual record here. That's the first picture that you've seen, and yeah, it was on vinyl only. We did it on this special pink kind of like an orange translucent vinyl, and we also did another run on white marbled vinyl, but I don't have any of those. And then the artwork on the middle was a painting from that one of my best friends, Boudica Collins, did on both sides. It's been really nice to collaborate with different people on the artwork actually. So that was my first release, which came out in October 2013, and it got like some good press, like quite low key, but people picked up on it. And then after that, another label based in London called No Pain in Pop, they got in touch and asked if I'd want to release an EP with them, and I thought, why not? So that's the second image you see there. I actually was looking for that record in my collection to show you on the camera, but I can't find one, which is news to me. I'll have to get hold of a copy. I don't know where they all went. But yeah, on that one, the artwork was done by an artist called Rachel Nobles, all digital. And that EP was called 19 Jewels, and that came out in 2014. And then after that, I released a 12-inch with a small label based in Bristol called Happy Skull. That's the third one you see. And then after that, another EP with No Pain in Pop again called Fate Exclusive. And I did the artwork for this myself. I had to teach myself Photoshop for this, which was really stressful. So yeah, I kind of left the artwork for the next one to another artist friend. And this was My House of Silk EP, which came out in 2016, and it was released on Ninja Tune, which felt like a dream come true, to be honest, because Ninja Tune's been one of my favorite labels since I was around 12 or 13, and been following what they do. And then to actually be in a position where I was releasing music on it just felt very surreal. And the artwork on this is done by another artist friend called Tom Flynn. It looks digital, but it's actually not. He uses this really cool technique of using like different like plastic bags and cellophane and other things in a dark room on photographic paper and creates amazing colors. I love his work. So yeah, that came out in 2016, and after that was my real first experience of doing a lot of touring, and it was intense but very fun. I guess I can talk about that a bit later. And then at the end of 2017, December 2017, is when I released my debut album, Weighing of the Heart. I did the artwork for this one myself, and it takes inspiration from the ancient Egyptian Weighing of the Heart ceremony. Gatefold, pretty nice, and that's the bag. Yeah, my first album. This is also the first record I released under my real name. So up till this point, I'd always been using the moniker Throwing Shade, which was it was just a name that I picked for fun, when I was starting to DJ on the side of uni. At that time, I never thought where music would lead me, but then when I got to this point and I was seriously working on my first album, started thinking about a lot of other things, and I felt like I wanted to just continue as an artist under my real name, and it feels good. I'm glad I made the change. So this was the first music I released under that name, and I've never cared so much about anything in my life. I've never put so much time and effort into anything. It was a real process, yeah, it's kind of overwhelming to think about even now. Now I'm trying to work on my second record, which is a whole other story. Okay, so here are a couple of pictures of live performances that I've done. So playing live, again, has been a real learning experience. My setup's changed a lot over the years, and it's something that, you know, every time you play a show, you learn more about it and you become more comfortable. Sometimes things go wrong, sometimes you have an amazing show, and each time there's things you can take away from it. These two photographs are from quite special performances I did. The one where it's all blue, that was from a collaboration I did with an artist called Chang Ding, a Chinese artist. We actually did one previous to this at the ICA in London. And then he invited me to collaborate with him on this project in Shanghai. So I was performing live here at the K11 Art Institute in Shanghai in summer 2016. And he'd created a space where there were, I don't know, maybe like 20 different speakers all around the room. And you know, we really shaped the sound to go with that, and then had like all these lights and screens. And yeah, I was actually playing with another artist behind a screen, and we were doing live improvisation together. So that was something different. And then the other photograph is from another very important live show of mine, and, you know, a really great memory. And that was collaborating with the artist Wolfgang Tillmans during his big exhibition at the Tate Modern in 2017. And he did a takeover in the Tate Tanks, the basement of the gallery. And he invited a number of artists to come and perform in the space. And, you know, I was really happy to be one of those artists. Again, like using speakers in a very interesting way, surround sound. The speakers were in the ceiling, they were in the wall, it was a round space. And I think the audience was about 600 or 700 people, and it was sold out. And at that time, you know, that was, I think, the biggest crowd I'd ever played a live show in front of. And also knows that it was like an art gallery audience, so it was very silent and everybody was just focused on the stage and on me. And I remember walking out onto that stage and just feeling a bit like, yeah, very nervous actually, because it was a totally different thing for me. But it was great. It was great. It was one show that I'll always remember. Oh yeah, and then I was trying to find some photos of DJ sets. So, you know, I make music, so as a musician and a producer, I do live shows performing my own music, but then the other strand of performing comes through my DJ sets. This is a photograph of the crowd at Glastonbury. It was my first time ever going to Glastonbury in 2017, and the reason I was there was because I was DJing, and I never ever, you know, it's always been a dream of mine to go to Glastonbury, and I never thought the first time I'd be going there was because I was playing there. So yeah, again, something to always remember. And it was really fun, and the crowd were amazing. As you can tell from this picture, everyone was really into it. It's a really great experience. And then the other photograph is from a boiler room set which I played in Italy in 2018. I mean, I don't even know how many DJ sets I've played so far. Loads and loads. And not all, you know, I think, yeah, if you speak to anyone else who DJs, they'll also say the same thing, that not all of them go really well. Like sometimes they're in kind of weird spaces or with crowds who don't really identify. But then, like, you know, you might play like 5 kind of mediocre feeling sets, and then you'll just have like an incredible experience, like Glastonbury here, or for example last year I played at MoMA PS1 in New York. That was another great one. And then you have those ones which stand out, and they're just the best. And you know, and right now being in lockdown, I'm realizing how much I miss and need that experience of, you know, enjoying music with other people, strangers and friends. And, you know, in terms of like dancing in a club or being at a gig, I'm really sad that we can't have that right now, but I hope things will get back to normal. Okay, here are some photographs of me working in different studios. The one at the bottom where I'm like looking at the screen, that was the first studio that I'd ever rented, and that was when I was working on my first album, Weighing of the Heart. I managed to get some funding from PRS to basically allow me to rent a studio for the first time. And again, that was like a really important milestone for me. And that studio is in West London. It was actually in Damon Albarn's building. And, you know, like growing up in the Britpop era, the first, and then being in his building, that was quite an surreal experience, because I remember the day I turned up and he was sitting outside, and then he was helping me move my stuff into the studio. And I couldn't even talk because I was just like, oh my God. But yeah, so that's where I recorded my whole first album. It was a good experience. And then the photograph above that, that's at me in Somerset House, where I'm currently based. Maybe like many of you already know as you're tuned into this stream, but Somerset House, which is an amazing, iconic building right in the centre of London. It used to be a palace. They've converted one whole section of it into studios for artists, which in a city that's changing so fast, and you know, a lot of times you hear conversations about like creative people or young people and artists and music venues being pushed out of the city. I think the fact that we've got a place like this right in the heart of London holds testament to the fact that there still are these spaces in which you can be creative, and where people want to kind of like help cultivate the art scene. And you know, I've been part of the Somerset House Studios residence for the last 2 years, and it's been great so far. So that's a picture of me in that studio. And then this other one where you see all the synths, loads of synths, is a residential studio in Devon. It's called Devon Analog Studio. And I just wish that it was my own studio, because it's one of the best places I've ever worked in. It's like in the middle of nowhere, in this wooden cabin. It's got all this amazing gear that like a lot of very rare synthesizers and drum machines and outboard stuff, and you just go there. There's like bedrooms and kitchen and everything you need. You've got to drive down with your supplies, stay there for a week, make music, go for runs in the morning. There's loads of sheep in the field outside the window. It was really idyllic. Hopefully I'll get a chance to go back there again soon. But if anyone's watching who makes music, and if you're interested in kind of like changing up where you work a bit, I recommend checking, you know, doing a bit of research and checking out Devon Analog Studio as somewhere to work. And so this whole like time of making music over the past few years, and you know, it's one massive learning experience, and sometimes things can feel kind of daunting about like going into a studio and feeling like you don't know how to use any of the equipment. But it's okay, like if you feel like that, because it's all about just, everyone starts in the same place, right? Like everyone starts at the beginning. So as you go along, you just learn how to use things, and you get more confident at it and better at it. And that studio in Devon, I was just using it by myself really, and Tristan, the guy who ran it, came to help me set some things up, but apart from that, I was just left to my own devices. And yeah, it was great. Oh yeah, so then in 2018, after, you know, being on NTS for a few years, I was asked if I'd like to do a radio residency on the BBC. And again, this was another surreal milestone, one to remember kind of experience. And also this was quite an important point, I think, for making my parents think, okay, well, she must be doing something right, because now she's on the BBC. Because, you know, like trying to tell your parents you do music, they're just, most of the time they just don't. They're just like, when are you going to get a proper job? My mum still says that to me sometimes. Anyway, so yeah, 2018, I got contacted to do a monthly Saturday night residency on the Asian network. And then that also went out on 1Xtra parts of it, and also Radio 1. And I ended up doing the residency for a year and a half, which is quite a long time. And then at the same time, just getting asked to cover for different DJs. And so I also presented my first ever show on BBC Radio 1, filling in for Benji B. Filled in for him, I think I've filled in about 2 or 3 times for him now. Benji B is one of my DJ idols, someone who I really look up to. And so, you know, getting asked to take over his slot whilst he was away is just another very humbling experience, and it was really fun. Doing radio on the BBC is completely different to doing radio on NTS, where, you know, basically anything goes. It is a dream to just be able to go into BBC Broadcasting House and to know that I'm here to record a radio show. Yeah, it was great because you go past the newsrooms where they do like the 6 o'clock news and stuff, and yeah, it was quite, you know, it's just a special thing to be able to do. But it was a very steep learning curve, I have to say, because you have to learn how to use all the different equipment. There's a lot more kind of slick and professional. There's a lot more rules and regulations, but it's that level of pressure is so good because it makes you learn things a lot quicker and just like absorb that information a lot faster because there's no other option. Okay, and then Glory to Sound is a music project which I launched in 2018 at Somerset House, and it's something that I've been thinking about for the last couple of years. You know, the inspiration for it was just the idea of, you know, what is the power of music? What is it about music which brings us together and gives us some of our most kind of like profound and spiritual experiences? And it's something that, you know, I feel like often we take for granted or we don't pay enough attention to. So I launched it with a 6-month series of events at Somerset House, different things. We did a talk series where I interviewed some people who I really admire about the most important music to them. We had guests like Wolfgang Tillmans, Sophie, David Ulasoga and Giles Peterson. And then I also put on some ambient live music shows inside the rifle range. There's an old shooting range in Somerset House, and I like the idea of you know, reappropriating a space that was originally had a very violent purpose, and then putting some really beautiful ambient music in there. And then and we also did a club night in the Dungeon where Casimos headlined, and yeah, it was great. And also just like the idea of putting on events, you know, in the middle of London. It's easy for everyone to get to. You're taking over this very historical building. They all went really well. We also took over the Somerset House ice rink over Christmas and did like a 3-day Glory to Sound takeover, which was really great. And I was going to launch the 2020 series of events in April this year, but obviously that's all on hold for now. But hopefully we'll be able to do some things soon. It's just a lot to organize by yourself, really. So, but yeah, I have to give a little shout out to my assistant, Natalie, who's helped me a lot with the Glory to Sound project and other things, because now it's just too much to do everything all by myself. Oh yeah, and then I thought I would just like talk quickly about like branded stuff I've done. Maybe people want to ask about this thing as well later on in the question section. I mean, in this day and age where it's like all about content culture, which I think is important not to be sidetracked by, but obviously the way brands work now is that they're teaming up with a lot of different creatives or sports people or, you know, others, and trying to do things together. And I feel like, you know, it can work really well for both parties, and there's things to take away from it. So the first picture you see, that was kind of like the first big collaboration I did with Urban Outfitters for when Fate Exclusive came out. So I think that must have been 2015. And yeah, it was cool because they funded a whole music video for me and like a photo shoot to go with that. They also stocked the EP, and believe it or not, Urban Outfitters are the biggest retailers of vinyl, I think, at least in Europe or maybe even the world. It's not like the first record store that comes to mind, but it's true. So they were stocking the record, and then in their flagship Oxford Circus store, they did this big window display for me for 2 weeks, which, you know, when you're an artist starting out, it's great. It's a great boost. So that was, yeah, it was quite a few years ago. So that was nice. And then the second picture you see is from a campaign I did with Fred Perry. Fred Perry are like genuinely one of my favorite brands, and they have been since I was a teenager. So again, like it felt like a natural partnership, and I've done a couple of campaigns for them, and then also DJ'd at different events of theirs. And yeah, they're actually such a nice brand to work with. Everyone who I've met there has been really, yeah, like wonderful people. And then the third picture you see, that's like a picture of my my younger brother Hasib, who spotted a poster with my face on it in the tube. This was actually a very big ad campaign that was on the London Underground for I think about like 3 or 4 weeks last year, maybe this time last year. And yeah, for that whole period I was just receiving a lot of selfies from friends every day taking pictures with the tube posters. But this was for a hiking brand called Merrill. Wouldn't normally, you know, it's not the first thing I think of when thinking about like, okay, what brands or companies I'd like to work with. But they got in touch and they wanted to do a feature looking at, you know, a creative person from the city and the importance of being able to get out of like your busy hectic lifestyle and get back to nature and all the inspiration we can draw from that. And it was, I'm not even just saying this, it was like the best experience of my life. We went to South Africa where, you know, I've already spent quite a bit of time, but we went on a hiking trip out in the Cederberg Mountains, and all those photographs are from that trip. It was really intense. It was actually the hardest thing I've ever done as well, because we climbed 3 mountains in 3 days. And beforehand, you know, when we just had like the initial conversations, when I think they were trying to figure out who they wanted to work with, and they're like, so like, do you do exercise? And I was like, yeah, I do karate, I do cycling, I'm quite fit. And they were like, okay, fine. But obviously that's quite different to actually climbing a mountain. And also the director only wanted to shoot at sunrise and sunset, so it meant we had to start at 4 a.m. every day. And at the beginning I was like, what have I just agreed to? But then, yeah, like I said, it was incredible. It made me realize the importance of, you know, just that, getting back to nature and just trying to slow things down and look at different things for inspiration, and just think about your relationship with nature and the world. So it was really great. And I think, yeah, that's the end of my presentation. Just like a kind of brief overview of what I've done. There's to try and like fit it in 10 or 15 minutes of speaking. And I think Scott is going to come back to the chat now. And then if there's anything in that you want to ask me about later, questions from the audience, feel free.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Nabihah. That was absolutely brilliant. You delivered such a nice personal and sort of reflective journey that actually most of the questions I had, you've kind of answered them quite brilliantly.
Yeah.
You can hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you. Oh yeah, I just got that message from
You speak
Ellen.
so well. You speak so like...
we never showed the music video.
We did. So we could do that after. I've got a few questions, then we could show the music video.
All right, I'll do that.
But we can maybe pull out some things during that. Your experience is really extensive, and looking at all the things you've done, like you're sort of known as a musician, producer, DJ, broadcaster, and actually model, which I didn't realise. But do you identify or define yourself within one role, or do you, when someone says, what do you say, I'm a creative, I'm a musician,
it's hard to, I mean, yeah, I do a lot of different things, but I'd say, yeah, I'm a musician, but also I've got like this very, I think, academic approach to music as well. I think because it was just because I was such a geek at school, at uni, and I, you know, and having studied music and like that kind of like very sort of like research based, like meticulous approach to finding out about music, but then also the enthusiasm of wanting to share things which I think are so interesting. So that's just led me to do different things, you know, like, you know, interviewing people, writing about music, doing radio, but then also making music. It's just, I mean, it's just all happened by itself. So I'm just going with the flow. That's the best way to describe it.
I guess you listened to your inner voice when you said you went from thinking about a law career to then actually to the family and your parents, like, I want to explore this avenue. Do you listen to your gut instinct often, and does it usually tell you the right direction, or you get the butterflies in your tummy kind of thing?
Yeah, exactly. I think gut reaction is always something to pay attention to. With me, you know, in 2013, when the music side of my life just started gathering more momentum, it just honestly felt like, you know, there was some sort of higher force pulling me in a certain direction. And because I love music so much. And, you know, always in the back of my mind, I guess, you know, you have that sort of like fantasy about what it would be like to be a full-time musician, but I'd actually never really considered it as a viable option for me. And so when it started happening and I was starting to get booked for gigs, and, you know, people were interested in the music and a lot of people were tuning into the radio show. So I felt like I just had to go with the flow. And since then, you know, talking to friends of mine as well who've made that switch and thought like, I just want to go full throttle in the thing that I believe in, and like my passion. And it is really scary at the beginning because, you know, it's something where everything depends on you. You don't have, it's not like having a 9 to 5 and having a set salary and like knowing exactly what you have to do. And also it's like a very oversaturated market as well. You know, everyone's clambering. I think it's got more hectic in the last few years just because of the internet and things like that. So there's loads of things which feel like real inhibitions that might stop you wanting to do that, but it's a pretty drastic decision to take. But I also feel like unless you take that decision, you never know what's going to happen.
Exactly. So no regrets.
Yeah, no regrets so far.
Awesome.
Although I don't know about like coronavirus right now.
Oh well, true. I guess I suppose like taking that right path and having that fear, like you mentioned when you performed at the Tate Tanks, it's like a different feeling because it's a different audience, and in those moments of fear is where you grow most. Can you explain more about how you cope with those kind of intimidating situations? So if you're live on BBC Radio or at the Tate or meeting Damon Albarn or one of these kind of instances, how do you be measured and like focus? And
I think it's important to remember that you know, nothing's easy all of the time. Like you just have to, once you accept that, and that goes for anything, for anybody in any walk of life, like nothing's good all of the time. So there'll be times where you feel really nervous. I've played a show where there was a power cut halfway through the set, and it was at a festival in Germany, and like, you know, festival crowds, if they don't know who you are, they're already like tougher crowds to kind of penetrate. And then when that happened, you know, that's like the worst nightmare. But all of those things, they're just learning experiences, and you just once you kind of like process that fact in your mind, I think it makes it easier to deal with things, because, you know, there's other things which will come up when things don't go your way, when you feel like, you know, you're in the middle of kind of like organizing a specific kind of project or a deal, you think something's going to go through and then it doesn't, and all of those things can feel you know, like quite sometimes devastating. It depends what it is, but you just have to realize that, okay, that's done, so just look forward. That's what I think. That's
really good advice. Again, that kind of resilience, bounce back is really important as a creative, because it's such a personal journey that you're going on yourself, bringing your audience with you.
Yeah, absolutely. And also it's something which, you know, that you can never prepare yourself for it, whether it's just having to read people's comments about your music or your videos or your DJ sets online. And, you know, everybody knows that there's like so many trolls online, and you're going to come across comments where people are going to be trying to like undermine your work or criticize you or just be straight up rude about what you do. But again, you know, it's easier said than done, but it's true. You have to really try and grow a thick skin and just think like, no, I'm going to stay focused on what I'm trying to do, and I'm not going to let those things slow me down or stop me.
Hold on to your sort of value systems and work with good friends, good collaborators. Just thinking about your background with law, without focusing too much on that, the training that you would have got in those sort of few years with ethics and kind of working with different people, has that helped the business side of your career? Because obviously you're very creative, but you're running a business in a sense. So those kind of initial skills, do they still come up in different areas?
Yeah, so this is something actually that I wanted to mention in this talk, is that I don't. It's weird how your life pans out and what route you take, and sometimes you're like, oh my god, you know, I definitely went through phases of thinking, oh, if I hadn't, you know, done 2 years of studying law, then I would have had 2 years extra to do music or work on that side of stuff. But honestly, I am so glad that I studied law before doing music, because I actually just feel like everybody should have some basic legal knowledge for whatever you do in life, because you need it just for like
Mhm.
whether you're dealing with an annoying landlord or whatever else, or whether it's a music contract. And you know, so far I've never had a manager. I've done everything myself. Even for a long time I didn't have a booking
Yeah.
agent. So first of all, when you have a little bit of knowledge about law and contracts, it gives you confidence, because when you read through documents you can understand them.
Mhm.
And then yeah, it gives you the confidence to go back and say, no, these things need to change, or to know exactly where you stand and what you need. And you know, if I'm 100% honest, like the music industry is full of wheeler dealer types, and it is full of
Mhm.
people who want to try and make a quick buck, and who want to try and rip you off, or who want something for nothing. And
Mhm.
when you hear about people like Elvis Presley dying broke, you know, or things like that,
Yeah.
it's crazy, because you know, he was one of the biggest stars in the world. And
Mm.
then when I think about the fact that, you know, I'm kind of like small, you know, I am small fry compared to him, and I still have to deal with people who are trying to rip me off. I can't even imagine what it would be like on that level of fame
Mm.
and success. But it's true. And so whether you have a manager and whether you have a lawyer or not, just knowing, you should know yourself what you're signing and what people are asking of you and what you're getting yourself into. So I cannot stress enough that you know, if you're creative, just spend a little bit of time teaching yourself about contract law, because
Mm.
it will really benefit you.
That is super helpful. Do you think also having like scheduled studio hours? So you go into the studio, you do the sort of business side, do emails, do the appropriate stuff, and then you can let your hair down and be creative and make noise and create beautiful sounds. Is that how you structure your day usually?
This is something which I have struggled with, and I'm sure other people who work, you know, in creative things will say similar things. And the time when it really got to me was actually when I was working on my first album, because
Mm-hmm.
that whole process of like immersing yourself in a creative project, it takes over your whole life. You know, it got to a point where I wasn't even thinking about like eating or sleeping or talking to people. I was just in the studio nonstop. And
Yeah.
then, like I said, when you don't have a manager and you have to do everything yourself, then you really need to find a way of juggling the admin
Mm-hmm.
side of your life and emails, which can easily take over your day, plus
Exactly.
being creative. And if you don't find a way to balance it, it can actually become really stressful. And I'm speaking from experience. So
Yeah.
what I tried to do, which I think was really good routine, but
Mm-hmm.
basically you need a routine, and that requires discipline. And when you're your own boss, no one's there to tell you what to do, so you have to do it yourself. And
Very
I
good.
was doing, for me, I've been doing it the last couple of years, is like having an early morning routine. So I find like if you can wake up at like 6 or 7 a.m. and go into your studio, wherever you do your work, and
Yeah.
try and do a 6 or 7 hours of work at least, and then by lunchtime you've done that, and then designate a time of day other add to do, and just make sure you, and I mean there's going to be times where you stick to that, because yeah, you have to try and do that as
Awesome.
well, because I got to a stage where I was like, I couldn't even look at my email inbox, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. We have lots of questions flying in, Nabihah, but I don't know, should we have a quick look at your music video and then we'll take questions, or will we do that? How long is the music video, did we see?
I think it's a few minutes, but to be honest, maybe it's better to just do questions now if
Yeah.
people are asking. And
So
then
we could
the video we wanted to show was for Zone 1 to 6,000, which is one of the singles off my album, and then people can go and watch it. People can go and watch it later if they want
That's
to.
fantastic. We'll make sure there's links on the webpage afterwards so people can
Okay.
catch up with us on that. That's cool. So the first question, there's lots coming in. So first one is from Imogen via YouTube. What advice would you give for someone starting out in music? What do you wish you'd known or heard when you were starting out?
Starting out, I think main points I'd say is that you have to work really hard, and you have to realize that it's not something easy. You're never going to get anything on a plate. And I don't know, my dad always says this thing was like, the harder you work, the luckier you get, which I guess is true to a certain extent. but you have to value yourself, I think, because okay, at the beginning of a career, you know, you're not going to have as much bargaining power. People will get in touch, and if the people are getting in touch about wanting you to play gigs, then at the beginning, yeah, you might have to play things for free or for really low fees. But I think throughout that whole process, you have to really think about like the context of where you are at that time, and you know, you'll get to a point where if it's your work, it's your livelihood. You know, people, I think sometimes when they're dealing with artists, they don't really get that. They don't like, they're trying to make your bread and butter.
Yeah.
And they want you to say, value your work, don't value nobody else. You know, there's not one way of getting into music, and I'm just telling you about my experience, which was just starting out because of my love of music and putting on parties with friends in London, and then that whole scene just like growing in its own way, and people branching off and doing their own things, and you know,
I love the laundrette, hosting
different
parties in the laundrette
things through their music, and it's been great to see. So it's all of that. I just feel like, yeah, you've got to.
Yeah. Oh, I think there's a bit of a time lag with so.
The laundrette, yes. Sorry, cut out a bit.
That's it. You can hear me? So next question.
Yeah.
Next question is great. Next question is from Lauren in Belgium. Where do you search or find for your new music, and any ideas when the new album will be coming out? So it's a fan.
Okay, finding new music. I think you know, when you're into something, like you feel passionate about something, you will go searching for stuff. And for me, there's different ways. Sometimes it's just from talking to friends, and friends being like, oh, have you listened to this? Blah, 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 check it out. You know, having a session, like just hanging out with your friends where you're all sharing music. YouTube, I think, is a really great way of discovering new music, because you can just go down the rabbit hole of suggested videos when you look at tracks. So I'm not going to lie, I've found loads of really cool music through that, which I'd never heard about before. Obviously record shopping, like I love collecting music and collecting records. So just having time, like never go into a record store with friends who are not into it, because you'll just end up feeling really guilty, because they'll just be like standing on the side.
Very good.
Yeah, just picking stuff out, you know, just listening to things, exploring, asking for tips from the people in the stores, listening to the radio. And for me, because you know, I've been so lucky getting to travel so much through my music and touring all around the world over the last few years. So whenever I go to a new country, I always try and find out about the local music scene there, and whether that might be, you know, going into a record store with some of the people I meet there, and like getting recommendations of them, trying to find music. But another thing which I love doing is talking to taxi drivers in different countries, because, you know, they spend their whole day in the car listening to the radio. They're local. Normally when you're in the car with them, it's because you're like going to or from the airport, so you'll have a decent amount of time to chat, and then just start asking them about what they listen to, or what's like the local music they're into, and then get your Shazam out. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but yeah, it's a great way of finding out about music.
That was actually one of the questions that came in, was you do lots of touring, how do you get your finger on the pulse in different cities? So that's really good advice.
Yeah,
chatting to Uber drivers and taxi cab drivers.
Yeah,
so
I think one of the amazing things about touring for music, you know, visiting different and new countries because of music, is that you're propelled straight into the heart of the music scene. Whereas, you know, when you compare it to traveling to a new place just simply as a tourist, sometimes you can feel lost, or you can feel like it's hard to find out where the right parties are, or find out about the local scene. And so this is something that I'm really grateful for, because immediately you're with those people and they can show you around, they can tell you about things, they can introduce you to music. So I always, if I'm traveling to a new place, if I can stay for 1 or 2 extra days, I always try and do it, even if, you know, you got to cover like the extra nights yourself or whatever, because you might as well, especially if you know, just going, I've been to so many new countries. Last year, the new countries I went to Georgia, I played there, Indonesia, Philippines, Malaysia, I was in Japan, Sierra Leone, like all these places, so which I'd never been to before. So you just got to try and make the most of it. Yeah, but I'm so,
Absolutely.
it's a dream. Honestly, I'm so happy that I've been able to do so much traveling. But I'm also
Yeah,
kind of enjoying no traveling right now because I actually got too exhausted from it, I think, at the end of last year.
that's good. Very cool. Oliver on Facebook has asked, as a DJ, do you think that inflating artist fees are an issue for grassroots promoters? So I guess that's for sort of big.
Yeah, I think it can be an issue because often, you know, if you've got a booking agent and they're dealing with they're dealing on your behalf with a small venue, and for them often they could be approaching from the like purely business perspective, wanting to get the highest fee so that they can get the highest commission, and not really taking into account the fact that, you know, they're dealing with a really small club or a new promoter who's just starting out and things like that. So I think, yeah, in those situations, it's good to have that like open discussion and understanding between yourself as the artist and the booking agent, because I know now I've got such a great agent who I really get on with, and he gets what I'm about. And, you know, you'll approach each booking inquiry, you know, in a different way, because you take into account who they are, what they're trying to do, what their honestly what their budget is. And I think that's important because like I think some of the most funnest shows I've ever played are the smallest ones, you know, when you're in like a small sweaty club and everyone who's turned up has turned up because they want to hear you play, and it's not like a kind of random footfall kind of crowd. And
That's nice.
And I love playing those shows, and I want to play them for as long as I can, or always, really. So yeah, I think
amazing.
Sometimes the venues or promoters get in touch directly with the artist to try and explain their situation and the fact that they can't offer loads of money, but they still really want to have you. So I think, yeah, it's just about like being open to having those discussions, and make sure, you know, you're not shutting people down because they can't pay you enough. And if you can get shows which can bring in bigger fees, then you can balance it out, you know, why not play those smaller ones as well?
Yeah, so it's about sort of strategy, kind of knowing where to prioritize, and also what you love to do and what's important for the business to sort of keep taking over.
Exactly, yeah. And it's important because it's those people, you know, the people who are honestly into your music or into your DJ sets, who have supported you the whole way through, and who want to book you play because they just really want to see you. You don't want those people to, because anyway, that's what it should be about.
Amazing. I think collaboration seems really important to you, working with others and sort of developing your practice alongside like the people that make your art, the artworks on your sleeves, and working with Wolfgang Tillmans and all these kind of amazing projects. Collaboration is really sort of vital for you. Is that true?
Collaboration is something that, you know, it's part and parcel, I think, of all of our lives and whatever field you work in. So it's great to be able to work on projects together, because if you're working with different artists, for example, it's bringing two egos and two perspectives into the room, and it's going to set you new challenges, but it's also going to make you think about things in a totally new way. So yeah, it's a great experience, and it's also, I think, important to just have good people around you, whether they're like, you know, professional collaborators or just friends. And we all need that, because making music can be a really isolating and lonely experience as well, because most of the time, if you're just a solo artist like me, you're just in the studio by yourself. You have no idea what you're doing and what people are going to think about it.
Very cool. We've got a question about NTS Radio. So you've been doing the channel for 7 years. You've had your show for 7 years. And I think you mentioned in your talk earlier that you've tried not to duplicate some of your soundtracks that you've used. But the question that's came through is, do you find themes, weekly themes or monthly themes, or is it just complete spontaneous and about how you feel for your show?
It's a mixture. So sometimes I've had a lot of themed shows, and I feel like they work really well because the audience can, you know, like kind of zoom into it, and they're like, oh, okay, this show is going to be about this. I think my most popular show to date was on NTS with my Muslim jazz parts 1 and 2, where I focused on music by African American jazz musicians who'd all converted to Islam at some point in their career, and then just spoke about the historical context of that, and the Black rights movement, and Black Panthers, and like white Islam, and all of these things, and how it fed into the spiritual aspect of music. And people really loved that show. And since then, there's so many, loads. Whenever I go to a new country, I love making field recordings, as well as trying to find some music from that place too. So then I piece all of those together and do country specials. So I've done specials on like Pakistan, Japan, Jamaica, China, South Africa, where it's just a mixture of music I've found and also recordings that I've made, and that provides like a nice sonic journey, I think, for someone, like a traveling sonic journey. So it's a mixture. But like the last couple of shows I've done on NTS, they haven't had themes, they've just been stuff that whatever I feel like playing. You're
attracted
right
now. To. I love Sonic Journey. That's a really nice, could be your autobiography. Sonic Journey. So I'm just aware of time. We've got a few more questions. We've got one from Maria, who's came from YouTube. When you start off doing a project, how do you overcome the fear if there's any failure at the start of the project, I guess? So do you have any, how do you overcome obstacles? Or I want to start this, I don't know if I'll be able to do it. It's kind of like the inner voice stuff that we all get, I guess.
That's true. I mean, I'm sure everyone gets it for their whole life, but you just have to persevere, and also realize that maybe you'll do like 10 hours of work in the studio before you get to that point of epiphany where you're like, oh my god, this is a good idea, this is going to turn into a piece of music which I like. And there's no other way around it. It's a real labor of love, and there's no shortcut. So sometimes you get every track on that last album. I honestly like put that skeletal idea for each of those tracks down, and maybe it took like half an hour or an hour for each one. But to get to that point, maybe I was working solid for who knows how many hours. So that's why it takes so long. But there's no other way about it, because unless you go through that whole like rigmarole, you're not going to get to that point. So I think
it's your sonic journey again.
Exactly. And there was that other question I didn't answer about when to expect album 2. I forgot to answer that one.
Of course,
well, I have had to restart it because my studio got burgled at the beginning of March, and I lost all the music that I've been working on for the last 2 years and everything for the new record. And it hasn't even really still sunk in because it was just too deep. I don't even care about the laptop, but also always back up. I learned the hard way. But now I'm starting again on album 2, and let's see, maybe next year, if nothing else goes wrong. Too many things have been going wrong for me lately, so hopefully now I can have a smooth run.
Awesome. We've got just a minute and so to go. So there's a few quick questions came through. So do you have a glamorous lifestyle?
No.
Who are your musical heroes, and do you still listen to them? So it could be guilty pleasures or
musical heroes would be the main ones. Michael Jackson, number one, always.
He was in your studio. Yes.
Michael Jackson, Jimi Hendrix, Bob Dylan, those are the 3 main ones, and I listen to them all the time.
How many records do you have in your collection, or do you know?
I don't know. I mean, it's not like, you can see it kind of goes like all the way along that way and all the way along that way. I haven't counted. It's not like a crazy amount, but it's always growing.
Good. And is it records or CDs? What's your first go-to? Always records? So.
It's a mixture. Obviously, like buying, I was like growing up in the 90s, early 2000s. That's when I was a teenager. So always started with CDs. Even buying tapes, like, when you didn't want to spend like $2.99 on the CD and the tape was 99p.
Yeah. So, and you could record off the radio. I used to do that.
Exactly. I used to do that a lot. Yeah.
You've done that. Nabihah Iqbal, it's been incredible to meet with you today and share your peer exchange. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me, and thank you to everybody who's been watching.
It's been really fabulous. Just to let everyone know that we'll have links to Nabihah's music video on the website, and also the next event is in 2 weeks' time with Akil Benjamin of Kamuzi, where he will be looking at how to develop sustainable practice. So we hope to see you again in 2 weeks' time. So for now, we bid you all a farewell. Thank you so much. Thank you to Eleanor as well.
Yeah, thanks, Eleanor.
Thank you much, guys.